Motherhood, but not quite as we imagine. Thought-provoking, refreshing, straightforward, sometimes taboo, often seemingly ordinary, but always honest. Welcome to School for Mothers, opening conversations we all need to have, exploring ways in which you can be fulfilled as a woman, once a mother. Now, here is your host, mother of 10, Danusha Melina Durban.
Hello and welcome back to the School for Mothers podcast. I'm Danusha Melina Durban, your host, and my special guest is Zoe Blaskey for an episode all about kind. Zoe's a fellow podcast host and the founder of Motherkind. We'll be exploring how to nourish ourselves in and amongst kids, work, business, and everything else. Are you ready to get started? Let's dive into the episode. Welcome to the School for Mothers podcast, Zoe. I'm really looking forward to talking kind with you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Oh, isn't kindness really difficult for some of us?
It depends. I think a lot of us find it easier to be kinder to others.
Oh, yes. I agree.
Particularly as parents, I think we find it really easy to tune in to our children's needs and how they're feeling. And yet, if you ask the kind of typical, stressed out, tired mum how she feels and what she needs, you're likely to be met with a confused look and then perhaps some tears in recognition that we so infrequently ask ourselves those really powerful questions.
How do you stay connected to your needs?
Well, I ask myself a lot. I think a relationship, I talk about this a lot. The relationship that we have with ourselves is the most important in our lives. We're not taught that. Society doesn't really model that for us, but that is a truth. Because when we lose connection with ourselves, I don't know if you know what it feels like. I know what it feels like. And it's really hard to live from that place because then you start to feel really guilty. You start to be living on someone else's timeline. Decisions become really hard when you're disconnected from yourself because it's really hard to access that truth within you. So that relationship with ourselves is so important. And yet what I notice time and time again is how little we invest in it. It's like any relationship. If we just ignored our friends and their feelings and their needs, we wouldn't be friends very long. And it's the same with our partners and the same with our children. We're so great often at investing in those relationships. Well, the relationship with ourselves is just the same. We have to invest in it. And I think that is something that often we don't know. We're not taught. No one taught me that growing up. I certainly didn't have that modeled to me from my caregivers. So the way that I kind of invest in that relationship with myself is just like any relationship. I make time for myself. And I think so often, particularly as busy mothers and parents, we can put ourselves at the bottom of the list really easily, because there's always something else to be doing and someone else to be prioritizing. But when we do that, everything in our life is harder. So, for me, I kind of spend 10 minutes every morning just checking in with myself. How am I feeling? Where's my body at? Where's my mind at? What's going on for me? Is there anything I need to process? And I do that a few times throughout the day as well. Just really simple, like micro, like 60 seconds. And then every evening I have a really nice practice where, I have a journal by my bed, and instead of kind of scrolling, which lots of people do, I don't have my phone in my room and I just jot down what's on my mind, and that's a way of like just investing in my relationship with myself. Because if we ignore these things, they don't go away, they come out sideways, I like to say. Which means that, it might mean that you have an extra glass of wine that you don't want to have because you're trying to numb that discomfort. Maybe you scream at your kids a bit more than you want to, or you're snappy with your partner. And actually, all those things are just the symptom of something going on, but you're not kind of connected to it. You're not processing it.
I'm wondering what you do. I love what you're saying, by the way, Zoe. It's wonderful, a huge, steer for us, the listeners. And I'm wondering what you do with your journal. Do you I'm thinking very practically.
Yeah.
Do you keep that journal out somewhere? Or do you, I know you said it was by your bed. I did hear that, but is it kind of something that if I bared my soul, I'm thinking to myself, would I want that sat there, or would I want it in a special place? Is that something that you've thought about?
I think it's just down to, the most important thing, right, is that you give yourself in a way that feels right for you. Everyone is different. Some space and time to process what's going on for you. Now, some people might want to do that. I have some clients who are like, I hate writing. I hate my handwriting. So they'll do it in the notes section of their phone. They might make that private. You can get apps now where, you can make private notes that are like triple password protected,
Yes,
but, so I think it's the important thing here is not necessarily the how, trust yourself that you'll figure that out, in what's right for you, but it's doing it, for me, and I do know the research on this, which is why I do put pen to paper, because it accesses a different part of your brain. There are some incredible studies about the power of putting pen to paper. There was a study recently that showed that just journaling could reduce symptoms of PTSD, which is a really serious mental health condition, can reduce those symptoms by 40%, just journaling, just by processing with ourselves with a pen and paper. So imagine what it can do for, us kind of stressed out, busy mums. It's incredibly powerful. So the kind of gold standard is, yes, pen to paper in a journal. You are going to experience benefits within a few days. But if that doesn't work for you, or if actually you're writing in that and you're realizing that you're censoring yourself for fear of someone reading it, then clearly that's not the right, that's not the right reading for you. I would ask, if a client was telling me they were really worried about that would make
trigger, wouldn't it? Yeah,
make me inquire about, trust in their relationship, or what was going on that they felt that wasn't safe. But for me, my journal has my deepest, darkest thoughts, feelings, and it's open on my bedside table. Not open, but it's there on my bedside table. I kind of trust. I mean, God, my husband is not interested, to be honest. And if he was, I'm not sure it would make so much sense. I'm not sure it would.
I think what you're saying is so right, in the fact that we have to find the mode, the medium that's right for us, don't we? The most important thing is that we create that space for a connection with ourselves and a relationship with ourselves that honours ourselves, our processing, or
exactly, and
stuff that we need to get out.
This is why we have this tendency, to want for quick fixes. I'm constantly asked, by journalists, like 5 tips, 5 this, quick fix this. It's because we've lost touch with how to figure out what's right with us. So I'm not going to tell anyone, what to do. I will say that the relationship with yourself is fundamental, and it's important to develop that. And I can give you some ideas of how I do it, and, what the kind of science and research shows. And then it's up to you to figure out, test, experiment. I always say, don't kind of believe what I say, try it out and see what works. It may be that you thought you'd hate journaling and actually you love it, or you thought you'd love it and you hate it, or, who knows what every person's experience will be. But it is important that we make time for that relationship. It really is.
It is, and we never know, as you say, what's going to access which part of ourselves till we actually experiment with it. So that's why it's so good to at least try it, isn't it? Now, how have you done this, finding space for yourself in lockdown? And, you've got a baby, haven't you? Another daughter. I mean, how have you done this? How are you doing it?
Well, I think the thing that I've learned about, because I kind of got on this path of, I guess, healing, I call it.
Yeah.
Which is where I really transformed my relationship to myself and life. And it really, really did change how I felt about myself and the trajectory of my life. I did all that before I was a mum. So I often joke, like, I was kind of meditating for an hour a day, going to yoga classes, you know, having loads of therapy. I'm in recovery, so I was going to loads of group, you know, support meetings, and it was all very luxurious. And then children came along, and I didn't have time for any of that. So I've had to find ways, and this is, you know, part of what I teach is how to do all of that good stuff that we need in order to feel connected and joyful and all the brilliant stuff that we want to feel in our lives. But how do we do that with zero time? So, you know, for me, my 10 minutes in the morning, I've just built into the schedule. So we have a set schedule in the morning, and we kept it during lockdown. And it means that I get to nip upstairs, and it's my getting dressed time. But I basically don't put makeup on or brush my hair. Instead, I use those 10 minutes. Once I've shoved some clothes on, normally leggings, just to sit with myself. I find that adds more value to my life than putting mascara on. That's how I do it. I also think it's really easy with children to find pockets to connect with yourself. You know, like my baby, she's 9 months now, and she needs her head stroking to sleep. Now, I could use that time to ruminate on, you know, all the clearing up that I've got to do when I go downstairs, or, you know, all the negative things. I could choose to do that, and sometimes I do. But, you know, that's a pocket of time where it's just me. It's really silent, unless she's kind of crying, and then it's less silent.
Yeah.
Typically, you know, before she drops off, there's a window there where I get it's actually really divine. You know, I get just to sit in the silence, and a really good kind of meditation is to listen. If you're new to it, is to listen to layers of sound. So what can I hear? I might be able to hear some kids next door, you know, wanting to go to bed, or I might be able to hear Rose's breathing, and it just anchors me utterly in the present. And, you know, in the present moment, there is nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong, because we're just in the moment, and, you know, all that stuff that happened that day, that's gone. I can't do anything about that now. That's just gone. And, you know, what's going to be for dinner, or the work that I've got to do that night, that hasn't arrived yet. So if I go there and start thinking about that, I'm just creating anxiety, which is what happens whenever we project our thinking into the future. It tends to cause us anxiety. So I just try to, like, take those little moments where I can, like pockets, like tiny pockets. There's an incredible study recently that showed like 60 seconds of just being present, i.e. meditating, but you could call it just being present. You know, doing that pretty consistently can actually start to rewire your brain, and has all the benefits of meditation, which we know are, you know, incredible: calmer, more resilient, less stressed, more able to respond to life, not react. So I think it's not about, you know, like in a Venn diagram, it's not about trying to find time for me and then time for the family. Like, I think that doesn't necessarily work, particularly if you've got a job as well and you've got young kids. It's kind of like, how can I find those pockets? You don't need a lot of time. Like, how can I find those pockets just to check in with how I'm doing? Like, yes, an hour-long yoga class is amazing, but that's kind of, if you're relying on that in order to connect with yourself, that's going to be tricky, because if you get to that once a week, that would be really good going. Well, it is for me in my life. So I think it's about trying to find those kind of moments just to integrate connecting with ourselves throughout our day. It's far more achievable.
Yeah, exactly. It's the word I was thinking all the time you were talking, which was integrating. It's not about separating things out, is it? It's actually finding self within the chaos, within the melee of those we love, within the domesticity, within the work, within it all. It's not coming away from it, because, as you say, if you're looking for that or depending on it, then wow, I know, I agree with you, Zoe. I mean, if I was to do that, then I'd be really, really malnutritioned on kind of, you know, deprived on the amount of time that I would have
Yeah.
to be with myself fully.
I mean, a lot of people will say, like, I've had some clients, I'll say, so what are you doing for yourself? And they'll say, oh, it's fine because I've got a spa break booked in with my friend for 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I'm like, that isn't what I'm talking about here. That is a really nice cherry on the top. But if that is, you know, that's just not what I'm talking about. It's got to be these little ways that we get to stay connected to ourselves, because isn't it easy? Like, gosh, you've got 10 children, isn't it? It's so easy to get lost. So easy to get lost in everyone else's needs. And when we do that, particularly over time, you know, the years add up, the days add up, and the weeks add up, and suddenly it's years, and you feel lost to yourself. You know, I see it time and time again, you know, illness, exhaustion, breakdowns, even burnout. So it's taking those kind of that intention, which is, even though my life is really busy, and even though I have all these people around me who are reliant on me to meet their needs, I can still meet mine too. I can still not get lost in this. And having that intention is incredibly powerful, because as stuff comes up for you, thoughts, feelings, you know, complex emotions, triggers from the past, you'll be able to notice them, as opposed to pushing them down and just, or not being aware of them even, and then kind of being sidetracked, you know, being absolutely bowled over by these feelings as they escalate within us.
Yeah, because they leak out, don't they? They always leak. So
if tap, you know, like the drips are there. Right, you know, absolutely, of course they're there. Triggers, stresses, worries, drip, 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 drip. You know, and if we don't find some way to lift that plug, it's going to cause a flood, right? Which can look like total overwhelm, total burnout, stress, screaming at the kids, you know, fantasizing about divorce and running away, you know, all of that. I've heard it all from, you know, I've worked with, you know, probably thousands of mothers at this point. So, you know, it's how do you just keep connected to yourself so that you can respond to your needs and your life and what's going on for you, instead of lurching in reaction all the time?
Well, you know, one of the things I love about the word responsibility is that it's an ability to respond.
Exactly.
And what you're talking about is, because we have so many responsibilities and you know, on our shoulders, that we do need to learn to have that ability to respond. And I like to think of them as daily kind of sacred micro practices, you know, and whether that's from, in my life, I've taught myself to nap anywhere, literally anywhere. And
that's such a good skill.
I can just literally say to my family, and I do, I'm taking a nap here right now. I can lay down, I take a nap, and it'll be about 7 minutes, maybe 9. I'm up. I'm so refreshed. It does wonders for me, and I feel really so in a different place. And then the other one that I find, certainly as children move into preschool, school age, I found that training them, it sounds a funny word, but it's about boundaries, really. It's teaching them that mummy needs her breaks, that actually all human beings need breaks. It's not that mummies need them, that we all need to have a little bit of time on our own. And so not just when mummy's feeling totally stressed and wants to, you know, like at them. It's actually to preempt that. So I say, you know what? I think I need to go have 5 minutes in my room. I'm going to have 5 minutes. I don't discuss what I'm doing. I just, you know, make sure everyone's safe, and then I go. And then that's, you know, they know that that's a sacred space for mummy to be where I am.
Yeah, and it's so important to do that, because children learn through modelling.
Yeah, don't we? Yeah, they do.
When, as a parent, doesn't matter, you know, or caregiver, when you model, because what you're really modelling is self-worth.
Yeah, of course.
You're modelling, like, I am worth looking after. What they're learning and absorbing is, I'm worth looking after too. So they are learning about what it looks like to have self-worth and to respond to their own needs. And if we think about the kind of opposite, of what it looks like when parents and caregivers ignore their needs and yet tell their children that their needs are important, it's really confusing for children, actually. Where we say you're really important and it's important that you eat well and drink enough water and, but they don't see us giving ourselves the same. It's a really confusing message. If you think about it, it's really confusing for children. It's totally incongruous.
Sometimes taboo, often seemingly ordinary, always honest.
Now, one of the best things about the School for Mothers is our global community. I'm proud to say it's a hotspot of empowerment. I'd love for you to join our judgment-free community of like-minded, ambitious and kick-ass mothers. All you need to do is search for School for Mothers group on Facebook or follow the link in the show notes. I really hope to see you there soon. It's a wonderful place. Let's get back to today's episode.
Schoolformothers.com.
There's an example I have that I'm seeing a lot. I live in the country and I see quite a lot of families with their bikes, their bicycles. And I'm seeing children in bike helmets, but not parents. And so I look at these parents and it isn't a judgment. This isn't a conversation about whether people should be wearing helmets. But what I notice is that I bet the parents have said, you need to have those helmets on. But mummy doesn't need a helmet and daddy doesn't need a helmet. But I wonder how that squares away in the child's head of, and I know my kind of kids would go, but you're not wearing them. So why should we? And I'd find it really difficult to say, well, my head isn't worth as much as yours if it hits that concrete. And I don't know where that, for me, that's a really powerful example of the dissonance between what we tell our children and then what we model about our own worth, our own value. Because I don't want my head to be smashed on the road either. And I certainly absolutely don't want my children's. So I don't know if you've thought about this particular example, but I see it so often.
Yeah, I have actually, because I was thinking about it just this morning, because I've bought a scooter to take Jessie to school.
Uh-huh.
I'm in Clapham and lots of the mums have scooters. It's not one of those fancy electric ones. But no one wears helmets.
Yeah.
When they're scooting themselves along, and but Jessie kind of said, well, so she has a little stand that goes on the front. Jessie's my 4.5, nearly 5-year-old. And she said, well, I need to wear my helmet because I wear it on the scooter. And I said, absolutely, I need to wear mine too. And I think I'm the only mum that I've seen on one of these incredibly slow, on the pavement scooters with a helmet on. But I think the point is, it's a beautiful illustration, but the point is much deeper, that if we really want our children to respect our boundaries, we have to do that through modeling, and that's from everything, and particularly as they get older around things like drinking and, all being kind to ourselves, being kind to others, being non-judgmental. It's so fascinating to me how many people struggle with judgment of others or anger or even just mood fluctuations and yet find that same behaviour totally intolerable in their children. Now, clearly that is mirroring. Okay, so
yes, of course.
So what happens is when we see something in someone else, including our children, that reflects a part of us we don't like about ourselves, we instantly try to shut that down. So I've seen this tons with clients, if they really, really struggle with their children's anger or sadness, it's never about what's going on with the child. It's typically, I would say always, about what's going on with that person. Why is sadness so hard for you to see? Why is anger so intolerable to you? Anger, sadness, judgment, these are all kind of really natural human experiences and realities. And I agree with you. I think it's fascinating how we don't let our kids have an off day. We expect them to be polite and compliant and responsible 100% of the time. And yet with ourselves, you know, we hopefully allow ourselves to have off days and to have days where we just don't feel like it. And so I think there's a lot to be said for seeing the kind of humanity in our children. I think so much parenting today has kind of taken that out. It sounds a weird thing to say, but expecting our children to kind of always be a certain way, you know, and not hit other kids. And, you know, they have ups and downs. And I think a lot more compassion, coming back to that word kind, you know, for ourselves would mean that we would be able to have way more compassion for our children.
Yeah, exactly. It is very difficult to offer other people what we can't offer ourselves. As you said, that mirroring, it is really, really difficult. So what's the first step then that you would, I mean, obviously yours is 10 minutes connection, journaling, and making sure that's absolutely, it sounds like it's fluidly non-negotiable. I'll put it like that. It's so embedded in your family that it's not even questioned. So where would you suggest different listeners with different needs begin to look to where are they being either unkind or kind? Where can they be kind? What would you suggest, Zoe?
Well, I think the body has way more wisdom in it than typically we give it justice. So I would say start to notice just when you feel tense in your body, when your jaw tenses up, or perhaps your forehead or your shoulders are coming up. You know, those moments where you feel perhaps like a knot in your stomach, or you might feel sick or exhausted. Those are all kind of tiny little messengers that something might be up. So that's probably a really good place to start, is just noticing. Like, awareness is such a vital step in any kind of change that you want to make, whether it's a big change or a tiny change. It all has to start with awareness, because you can't change what you're not aware of. If you're not aware of something, how can you possibly start to change it? So that's the first step, is start to become aware of how you feel. And that's really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about that relationship with yourself. Yeah. Because if you don't really know how you feel, it's going to be really hard to figure out how to feel better or feel different or feel at all. So that would be the first thing, is connecting with your body and your feelings, and start to notice, you know, if there are any patterns around that, you know, when you feel stressed or exhausted or really resentful, and then see if you can practice putting names to those feelings. Something that I notice all the time with clients is how hard adults can find it to connect with their feelings. Often it's a skill that we have to learn in adulthood if we weren't taught as children.
When did you learn it?
I learned when I was 25 to now. I mean, I think it's forever learning. Like, still today, I can have an uncomfortable feeling, and my instinct is to want to numb it, because that's what I witnessed growing up in my family, was that feelings were kind of never discussed. And when I noticed my mum perhaps having a hard time, you know, children are really energetic and they pick up on what's really going on very quickly. But if it's not talked about, then they make up that that's about themselves.
About them, yeah. Yeah, of course.
So I kind of witnessed my parents going through hard times with their feelings and emotions and, you know, some of their own challenges in life. And it was never talked about. But what I did witness was my mum kind of numbing over those feelings. So that's really, clearly she never said this explicitly, you know, she never said, oh, feelings are to be not, you know, obviously this is all picked up on just by watching and by thinking about energy of what was going on in the house. So I thought that feelings were unwelcome unless they felt good, they were unwelcome, and that the aim of the game was to get rid of them as quickly as possible. So that led me down a really interesting path, obviously, of trying to numb uncomfortable feelings. I now know that feelings are to be as human as breathing is, and that, no feelings are really good or bad. They are just feelings. But it's taken me a long time to learn to feel them. It really has, because I was petrified of feeling anger or fear or disappointment or resentment because I didn't know how to do it. So I had to learn it in therapy. I learned it in meditation. I learned it in loads of different healing modalities that I tried, tons of stuff.
Yeah.
Try and learn it. And now, I'm pretty imperfect at it still, but I do make sure that my girls witness me feeling my feelings in an appropriate way.
Yeah. I'm wondering about your mother. Are you close to your mum now?
Yes, we've always been really close, really close. She is and was a fantastic mother. Both my parents were incredible parents. They loved us. Oh my gosh, like the sacrifices that they made. This isn't about a lack of love. It's about, both of them had really unresolved traumas that they didn't have the opportunity. They hadn't gone to therapy. They hadn't worked on any of those. So they were doing the absolute best with what they had.
Yeah.
It's just that what they had was kind of dysfunctional. But obviously I didn't realize that until I started to unpack it all. And I was really lucky because our family imploded in quite a dramatic way when I was 22. And I say lucky because that I had really no choice but to go and get some help, which, was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I learned about all the ways that I had adapted my behaviours and all the thinking that I had about the world that just wasn't helpful, and was actually causing me loads of pain. I got a chance to look at and unpack all of those so that I could live a totally different life. And then now that I'm a mum and a parent, I get to model a totally different way, which is, to me, there's no bigger thing in life actually than to be on this path of not repeating the dysfunction and the pain that was, for generations. God, I often say I come from a dynasty of it, addiction, suicide, depression, anxiety, all of it, across both sides of my maternal and my paternal for generations back, like 7-8 generations. I've tracked this stuff. So it's massive. It's my main job. Motherkind is like a side project. My main job is my own healing, and trying my absolute best to stay in the light, and to notice what's coming up for me from the past, and not running and numbing, which is what was taught to me, but actually trying to do it a different way, which is feeling it, processing it, being kind to myself.
What an incredible gift that implosion was, that enabled you to do that unpacking, and therefore enables you now, as the result of a lot of work, and I obviously can hear that, actually to break that lineage, that generational lineage that you could continue, but actually, as you say,
and it did continue, for 7-8 generations, it continued.
Yeah.
So, gosh, I often say, it's so true that the most challenging things that happen in life, I believe are gifts. I didn't know it at the time. And at the time, if someone would have said that to me, I definitely would have punched them. So if you're going through something really hard, feel free to metaphorically punch me in the face, because I know that feeling. But, with space and time, I can now see how it was absolutely the best thing that ever could have happened to me. But the only way that we kind of get there is by doing the inner work. People say, we grow through challenges. Yes, and there is something called post-traumatic growth. Yes, but we only get that if we take the time to reflect on what we've learned, which comes back to this time and space thing, We only get that wisdom by processing it.
Absolutely. It doesn't just arrive on a plate. It just doesn't, it's not an injection overnight. We actually have to be active in terms of investing in ourselves to do that healing, and to, whether it's healing, but actually to invest in self. That's what kindness is, isn't it? So yeah, it's a beautiful conversation. I really love hearing your amazing transparency, actually, about why this is the most central job in your life. Yeah. I mean, your kindness to yourself will lead to everything, won't it? I mean, of course it will. And it's a gorgeous message. It's exactly what we all need. Thank you so much for this.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's been a joy to connect.
If you enjoyed this episode, and I really hope you did, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts, or email me on hello@schoolformothers.com. That's hello@schoolformothers.com. What part of this episode, for instance, struck a chord with you? I'd love to hear from you. Well, that's all for now, listeners. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a fantastic week, and of course, stay safe. Sending you lots of love.
Thank you for tuning in to the School for Mothers podcast. To continue the conversation and keep your dose of inspiration up, head over to schoolformothers.com/podcast, where you'll find bonus content from Danusha and her guests on habits, recommendations, books, best apps, time-saving secrets, life hacks, health, sleep, and anything in between. That's schoolformothers.com/podcast.